Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Humor in the Workplace. My name is Patrick Malone. I'm the director of the Key Executive Leadership Program. And for those of you that joined us for our very miserable content on our webinar, I'm so sorry about the technical problems we were facing. So this is going to be a new and clean version of this presentation, and I hope that you all will enjoy it and will certainly be able to use it. One of the things I was saying early on this morning when I was talking to our team about this was that I'm always looking forward to being able to do this because I get to tell jokes essentially for the next, however long I want to do, 45 minutes or so. So I'm going to do that. But here's what I'm going to do. The first thing I'm going to do is tell you a little bit about our university for those that are not familiar with American University and with our program at the Key Executive Leadership Program. We are part of the American University. It's a wonderful liberal arts school there in Northwest DC. And the Key program has been around for about 50 years doing leadership development for those in the public service. And we take great pride in the work that you all do. You are our heroes. Thank you all for everything that you do to deliver civilization to all of us. And we hope that we are able to give back a little bit with these webinars and all the other events that we sponsor. So here's where we're going to go as part of this presentation. We're going to start off talking a little bit about the history of humor, and then followed by a joke. And then we're going to talk about why we laugh, followed by another joke, and then how we laugh, followed by a joke, and then why it matters, followed by a joke, and then how we do it, followed by a joke. Now, I'm not going to tell a joke every single time, but I do want to talk a little bit about humor and tell some jokes along the way, because it's very important for us. And I hope by the end of the presentation, you'll understand why. If you're still sure you want to be part of this, great. Now would be the time to bail on me if you don't, but I hope you stick around. Let's talk about a couple of fun things regarding humor. The great muffin joke. Here is the great muffin joke. There are two muffins sitting in an oven. One looks at the other and says, "Wow, it's hot in here." And the second muffin says, "Oh my gosh, it's a talking muffin." You can still bail if you want to, but that's the joke. It's a good joke, though. What can I tell you? So let's do a little bit of history. So we know that even back as far as prehistoric times, that there was some sort of humor. In fact, anthropologists and psychologists and sociologists have all pondered when humor and when laughter actually began. Did cave people tell jokes? Did they study history? Which actually, that's a joke in and of itself, if you didn't catch that. But we give a lot of credit to the Egyptians. The Egyptians had a great sense of humor. In fact, right around the time, early Egyptian times, we find the oldest joke ever found, which dates back to about 2300 BC. And yes, it is potty humor. I'm going to leave that to you to look it up, but there is a joke out there, and it's definitely potty humor. But the Egyptians get a lot of credit for their love of laughter. There have been hieroglyphic depictions of animals doing things like driving chariots and playing board games. Sort of like a modern day version of the Cassius Coolidge painting of dogs playing poker. Egyptians were also big fans of satire. Their artists spent a lot of time utilizing witty caricatures of queens and common folks. So they were pretty active. The Greeks came along. They weren't quite as exciting from a humor perspective as the Egyptians were. They were a little negative about laughter, maybe because they conquered Egypt in 332 BC and they didn't really like the Egyptians' sense of humor. But of all the grumpy Greeks, Plato was the worst, and he even targeted particular professions. If you were the Greek equivalent of working at the Department of Motor Vehicles, aka a government employee, he considered laughter as a huge no-no. He considered it cruel and irrational. If you were a comedy writer, you were out of luck. So the Greeks, not that great on the humor side. The Romans, much, much better. In fact, the Romans give us our first actual joke book. Pelagios, which is the first joke book ever found. It's loosely translated as One Who Loves Laughter or The Joker. It was written somewhere between the 4th and 5th century BC. It contained about 265 jokes. For example, one of them being an idiot bumps into a friend and says, "I heard you had died." And the friend says, "Well, as you can see, I'm quite alive." And the guy says, "But the guy who told me so is much more trustworthy than you." So yeah, it's a pretty good joke. But even the political leaders of Rome got into the act at the time, albeit with some reservations. Remember, we're talking about ancient Rome, and there could be a very heavy price to pay for angering the wrong leader. According to Mary Beard's book highlighting Roman humor, Julius Caesar took a real comedic beating from his colleagues for his comb over. Turns out making fun of baldness was in the okay category for the ancient Romans. So we know that we had humor historically. And one of the questions I like to ask is, why do we laugh? And here are three theories of laughter. One is superiority, one is relief, and one is incongruence. The superiority theory is the earliest dated theory on laughter. It goes back to the time of Aristotle and Plato. And the idea being that we laugh because we're trying to put ourselves in a position above someone, or we're trying to put someone else down. And you can see this still play out today with people that use laughter for more narcissistic purposes. The second one is the relief theory. This came along about the mid 1800s. The idea with the relief theory was that we actually have relief of suppressed energy when we laugh. For example, let's say we're working as a team on a big project and someone comes in and says, hey, the boss said we have to start over. And we say, what? That can't possibly be true. And they come back and go, no, it is true. No, I'm just kidding. And then we go, oh my gosh, and everyone kind of laughs. That's the relief theory of humor. And then the incongruence theory, well, this is the theory that is tied to the inconsistency in thought, the surprise. When Amy Schumer tells a joke or Jerry Seinfeld tells a joke and they walk you down a path, and then it turns out that at the end of that path, the joke, they say something totally unexpected. That's incongruence. And that's one of the most accepted theories of why we laugh. But the real answer to why we laugh is because it brings us together. And this goes back to the prehistoric period. This was the time, scientists have suggested, for example, that ape play was an evolutionary foundation of laughter. And when I say ape play, I'm not talking about our kids tearing up the basement. What I'm talking about is that those rare times when prehistoric man and prehistoric animals felt comfortable and safe, and they bantered about in a way that gave rise to modern laughter. In fact, 2 million years ago, when we gained control over our facial motor systems, we knew that laughter was here to stay. And that's what happened with how we developed and how we ended up and why we ended up actually laughing. Now, how we laugh is another question. And that's another fantastic thing to look at, because the brain, works into laughter. And in fact, there's three major components. It's the recognition of the joke, the getting it, and the motor aspects of the brain that allow us to actually laugh out loud. Now, we laugh at a lot of things. Adults don't laugh as often as children. In fact, we laugh far less than children do. LOL doesn't count, by the way, on your text messaging. And sadly, it's a fact that we laugh less as we age, and we laugh less during the work days. It does help that we enjoy laughing, even if we don't do it enough. We laugh differently at different things, at different ages. We laugh if we're being tickled, or if we're doing the tickling. By the way, we do not recommend tickling as a leadership practice. Please do avoid that. But the symphony of respiratory muscles and the voice and the larynx and the nasal passages, all of these create a unique laughing sound. And we can think of the brain as being very critical in making that happen. And once we get to the motor component of the brain, 15 different facial muscles, including the zygomatic major muscle, allow a visible smile to form. Airflow from the larynx is interrupted because the epiglottis is blocking it. We start giggling. The next thing you know, we're laughing, and our face turns red and tears may even start to flow. We're now in absolute full laughter mode. One of the beautiful parts about this is the sound that we make when we laugh. So let's see how this sounds on the recording here. You may not be able to hear this, but the sound of different people laughing differently is something that is uniquely human, but also allows us to laugh with one another. And even if you can't hear her voice, you can see the face. And this gentleman here, you can see his face, and the laughter that happens as part of joking and having a good time and having fun. This is something that for human beings is very unique to us. We also know, for example, that we laugh more when we're with other people, or if we're witnessing people laugh. And the sound is so unique. In fact, scientists have suggested that there are several different types of sounds that we make. For example, a smirk, a smile, a grin, a snicker, a giggle, a chuckle, a chortle, a laugh, a cackle, a guffaw, a howl, a shriek, a roar, a convulse, and a die laughing. Yes, they actually do list that as a type of laugh. So that is one of the beautiful parts of laughter, is the sound that we make. And now the great veggie joke. So a woman walks into the doctor's office and she has a carrot stuck in her nose and a piece of celery stuck in her ear. And she says, doctor, I'm not feeling well. And the doctor says, Well, I know why already. You're not eating right. Let that pause. I'm so much better with a live audience. Why does it matter? It matters a lot when we laugh. It matters because it's a workout. We know that laughing can burn up to 50 calories if you laugh for 15 minutes. We also know that a piece of chocolate has about 50 calories in it. So we've now really discovered the secret of life. You eat a piece of chocolate and you laugh, and then you eat another piece of chocolate and you laugh. And anyway, but it is a workout. And think about it. I mean, all the muscles that are engaged in laughter, it's definitely a workout. We also know that laughter is important as blocking disease and helping our immune system. There's a wonderful story by a man named Norman Cousins, who back in the 60s made himself pain-free and improved his immune system by laughing while he was ill. It's a wonderful story if you get a chance to look it up. The gentleman's name was Norman Cousins. He was an author and a philosopher and a writer and a teacher. But we know that laughter will help to improve our body's immune function. We know that our cortisol levels, for example, increase when we're watching people laughing when we're laughing. In fact, the field of the psychoneuroimmunology, which is a hard word to say, is the study of how the brain impacts our immune systems. We know that laughter can reduce stress. We know that it increases vascular health because blood flows, it increases the elasticity of blood vessels. We also know it relieves pain. I mean, I used the example of Norman Cousins. There was also some research in Europe done where people had an icy cold wine sleeve put on their shoulder or on their arm, and they were asked to maintain as long as they could before it got too cold. People that laughed for 15 minutes prior to doing that were 10% more pain resistant. So laughter does help us relieve pain, and it can do so for up to 24 hours after the experience. It also improves our mental health. I can't say enough about this. Cognitive neuroscience, since neuroscientists say that because laughter engages both sides of the brain, we're able to make very sophisticated connections necessary to understand a joke. And that exercises our brain, which opens our mind up to be more creative and more innovative. It makes us happier. It improves our mood. So it's definitely a beneficial thing for us in terms of body and mind. Now, one of the questions that often comes up is, well, why don't we laugh more in the workplace? Well, a lot of reasons why. I think it's a very sad situation because there are a lot of workplaces, and one of the things that we saw in the live version of this was we saw people chiming in saying, my bosses just have no sense of humor, and a lot of them don't. I think one of the reasons we don't laugh is there's a lot of narcissistic and egotistic bosses out there, and that's too bad. That's something that we can definitely work on. The argument that we're professionals, that's the most silly argument I've ever heard, to suggest that professionalism and laughter are somehow not connected. Professional doesn't mean being inhuman, and professional doesn't mean being impersonal. So humanity and laughter are something that are important for us. Being professional is too, but they're not mutually exclusive. We know that laughter helps to create a more trusting environment. We also know that people are afraid. I mean, going back to having a difficult boss. And then we get the argument about being serious. And, this picture is a picture of an operating room. We've got a surgeon, you notice on the right side, looking over his left shoulder, the assistant next to him, and then the anesthetist behind them. And you also see the person in the foreground. That's a surgical technologist. That's the job that I had when I was in college. So I scrubbed on everything: craniotomies, open hearts, kidney transplants, everything you can imagine, for 4 years to put myself through school. And I never laughed harder than when I was holding a retractor that had your spleen in it. I mean, once you go under in that room, it's a funny place. So if we want some serious, there's a lot of serious going on in an operating room, but we still found time to have fun and to laugh, enjoy each other's company. Speaking of laughing, the great penguin joke: a penguin walks into a bar and says, "Hey, I'm looking for my brother." And the bartender says, "Well, can you tell me what he looks like?" See, because penguins, like, they all look alike. Get it? Okay. Next, why it matters organizationally. Well, there's a lot of reasons why it matters organizationally. We know that laughter is a huge morale booster. Laughter brings people together. People enjoy coming to work when they're connected with those with whom they serve. They also build more trust because they're getting to know each other. They're letting their guard down, and they're more innovative. I mean, the new thinking patterns I mentioned before are exactly what happens whenever we're able to be innovative and to create that humorous workplace. Another advantage of laughter in the workplace, it improves retention. People are less likely to miss time at work. They stay, they don't leave, they don't change jobs. The team building is stronger, and it's good for the boss. And bosses who engage in self-deprecating humor are viewed as more connected. They're viewed as more engaged by the people that they lead. And I'll talk a bit more about that later. So how do we do this? Well, if you've been to any of the programs for the Key Executive Leadership Program, you know that what really matters is a change in mindset. We have to be a little bit more extemporaneous in the way we think and the way we view the world. And it means stepping outside of our biases and looking at things in a different way. This helps us build those new thinking patterns. It helps us see things that we didn't see before. And it begins and ends with authenticity. I mean, this ability to be able to be authentic and to actually laugh at yourself is crucial for introducing laughter in the workplace. In fact, it's probably one of the best tools that we can use because it's one of the safest tools. When we introduce laughter and humor into the workplace at our own expense, we're not offending anyone. And that makes it a lot easier to do. And, I'm just going to say something about smiling. And I'm going to direct this to the gentleman on the line. Gentlemen, it helps. I mean, men tend to adopt a very stoic and sometimes alpha kind of presence. Just knock it off. What we need to be doing is smiling and engaging more often. People that smile are seen as smarter. They're seen as more competent. They're seen as warmer. They're seen as more caring. And it can open the door to conversations. It can also help diffuse difficult situations. So by all means, be willing to laugh at yourself as we move forward in getting this to happen in the workplace. Being appropriate, yeah. I mean, this is the big double-edged sword piece of laughter, is being appropriate. Yeah, of course, we could probably offend anyone, but I would say that the jokes I've told so far, you'd have to go a long way to truly be offended by those jokes. Anyone could be offended by anything, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try humor in the workplace, because we should, and we should never have workplaces without it. Being appropriate matters. And the reason I have this picture here is because this is a sailboat that has its sails out fully in a very heavy wind. When sailors go into a heavy wind, they reef their sails. And what that means is that they make the sails smaller. They bring them in because then it allows you to control the boat. And it creates less surface area of canvas. So it's a very important thing to do when you're in heavy wind. The problem with this picture is that these sailors did not reef the sail. And the saying in the sailing world is that when you think it's time to reef, it's too late. And I would say the same thing about appropriate humor. If you think it's not appropriate or you think it might not be appropriate, it's too late. It's not. So use your judgment here, but by all means, avoid any type of humor that points out physical or mental characteristics of people. Avoid any humor that's directed to a group of people or groups of people or nationalities of people or cultures of people. Avoid those and you should be pretty safe. Going shopping. This is my favorite recommendation. This is a Slinky for those of you not born in the 60s. And I have in my office these little bendable, soft kind of plastic things that I like to leave out. And when people come in and they sit down, they'll immediately pick them up and start playing with them. When you see that happening, people's minds are working and they're thinking and they're being creative. So by all means, put creative play stuff out in your office, because that can help people when they sit down. They're much more comfortable and they can start thinking about things. And finally, just be you. Humor in the workplace is not about joke telling. Joke telling I think it's overrated. You're telling a joke, there's a whole big setup. You may not be good at the joke, as you've probably witnessed with me already. But joke telling is not the answer. Wearing goofy hats and things like that are really, not the answer. You don't have to try too hard. I think beginning with a little self-deprecating humor is the way to go. It's always the safest approach, and it sends such a strong message about your self-confidence and your self-esteem, and it relaxes people around you. I'm really advocating that people laugh at themselves more and take themselves a little less seriously, because that makes us more professional. It makes us more relatable in the workplace. Just being yourself, it's really not that difficult. One of the things that you can, it can be anything. I just did it a second ago when I said, when I said that not all, some jokes are offensive, and I probably did it already. Well, that was a self-deprecating comment. And I didn't do that as part of a script. I did that because I just kind of naturally said it. But it's something that I think is important for all of us. Humor is so important to make connections with other people. Go back to what I said about the prehistoric cave people who built relationships and had connections in very dangerous times, and that guttural kind of laughter, that grunt, that communication that was the beginning of what ultimately became laughter in our species was absolutely crucial to helping us connect with one another. So doing this in the workplace is not unprofessional. It's not inappropriate. It's something that everybody's seeking. People are seeking laughter, especially now. They're seeking love in the workplace and kindness. These are the soft skills that our leaders need. Being a leader is not about knowing everything, and being a leader is not about being the technical expert. Being a leader is not about carrying the title or the degree. It has nothing to do with that. Leading is not related to position in organizations, not even a little bit. Being a leader is about being you. It's about connecting with other people. So by all means, please do that. And do send me an email if you've got a particular question about any of this material. I'm happy to send some articles. I'm happy to connect you all with some really interesting research on how this works and why it works the way it does. And of course, if you're working in an environment where you think they need a dose of this kind of message, I am more than delighted to come out and speak with your team, either in person, I guess when we get to that, or online, and share this with them. Sometimes coming from an outside source, it's helpful and a little bit entertaining. So I'm hoping that happens, because I think we have a real need for this. And with that, I just want to say thank you to all of you once again for tuning in. I greatly appreciate everyone's patience as we struggled with our communication issues. That has nothing to do with American University. It has to do with the internet signal where I live. And so I'm trying to make some corrections to that. I've never worked from home as much as I do now. But I do not have a very strong internet signal where I live. So I'm going to make that correction. We're going to fix that in the future. But by all means, thank you all so much, and appreciate everything that you do and for delivering civilization to all of us. Thank you, and hope to see you at another key event very soon.